Wow. Just like in the movies.
Before there was Katniss, before there was Ripley, before there was Buffy, there was Laurie.
Yeah.
Telling me about the importance of this character to the ethos of women who kick butt in horror films and action films.
You know, I know it's the thing that people say about women who fight back, is that we kick butt. You know, if you look at the first movie, Laurie wasn't anything like those women. Laurie was a repressed, intellectual high school student with sort of romantic delusions. And she was forced by circumstances way beyond her control to face her deepest fear, which is surviving a madman with a knife. And then the woman you meet 40 years later is a woman who survived that trauma for 40 years, trying to convince everybody in her populace that he was coming back. She only kicks butt when, again, she is forced to by the confrontation with Michael Myers. And so it's tricky because any woman who fights back is a survivor and a champion. And we have a world right now where women are finally saying enough is enough, time's up, me too. And Laurie Strode is one of those women. It's just she's not an ass kicker. She is a survivor. And it's different, I think. I think it's a movie about trauma. I actually think it's surviving trauma is the sort of underpinning of the story. This is a girl who at the age of 17 survived this attack, and there were no mental health executives, no help, nobody came. She was barely injured. She had a small cut on her arm, and that was it. And I think she was forgotten. I think her parents were those Midwestern parents who said, well, you're okay. And no one paid any attention to the level of trauma and PTSD that she suffered. That's who we meet 40 years later, as a woman. She's had her child taken from her because of her perseverating that Michael Myers is coming back. Michael Myers is coming back. Can you imagine? She went into a first grade classroom with her daughter and met her first grade teacher. And Laurie's first question is, what's your exit strategy? Now, today, sadly, every first grade class has an exit strategy. They have an active shooter policy. They have a shelter in place policy. But you see, in 1983, there was none of it. And so Laurie would go into these schools as a mom and try to convince them that Michael Myers was coming. And they all thought she was crazy, and the state took her child from her. So you see, she has suffered many indignities in the process of surviving Michael Myers. And that's who we meet 40 years later.
How do you feel about the fact that this movie is setting up to follow the 1978 original and kind of putting all the other films that you worked on just to the side?
You know, these other movies were merely other people's stories. And it's the nature of sequels is that the next time you come up with another story. And I love what David did, because what he and Danny did is basically separate those other movies in toto. They exist. If you love them, love them. If your favorite movie is Halloween 6, go watch it. It has no relevance to the retelling of this story. There's only Halloween and this movie. That's why they're both called Halloween. There's no number attached. There's no subtitle.
Did you go back and watch the original at all before you read
I know
the script,
every
or?
second of the original movie.
Still to this day?
To this day. There was a moment where David was conceiving a section in the movie where Laurie talks about fate. And he said, oh, what did she say in the original movie? And I, like that, looked at him and I said, Costain wrote that fate was somehow related only to religion, whereas Samuels felt that fate was more like a natural element, like earth, air, fire, and water. And now this was a line I uttered when I was 19 years old, 40 years ago, and I remembered it like that quickly.
What do you think it is about Halloween that keeps it timeless and makes it so true to that like slasher mentality?
I think people like to be scared. I don't understand it. I'm not a shrink. I've played one on NCIS, but I don't really understand why people like to be scared. There's not an amount of money you could offer me to go be scared. Life is scary. Politics are scary. The world is scary. But people have that need. And as you said, it's cyclical. And it just so happens that there was kind of a wacky election a couple of years ago that really resulted in a lot of anger and a lot of frustration. And a lot of people are really frustrated. And there is no better way to get your frustration out than to basically scream. And I think somehow that the way all of it lined up was this sort of perfect moment, coinciding with Me Too, Time's Up, and all of this female empowerment where women are taking back their narratives and saying, enough is effing enough, and it's my turn to write the narrative. And that's what Laurie Strode has been trying to do for 40 years by saying he is coming back, he is coming back, he is coming back. And so it feels like the confluence of that frustration and that rise of empowerment has come together in this movie in a beautiful way. Simple, classic, scary as all heck, and yet very powerful.